like to welcome to the show the President of the Federation of Ugandan Football Associations, better known as FUFA, Engineer Moses Magogo. Thank you very much for coming on the show, Mr. President.
You're welcome, and I'm proud and privileged to be here on the show.
Thank you very much. I don't think UBC has seen you for a long time, so I guess I had to disguise it as Cedric Live so you could come on the show. But I guess you're here.
No, I always love to speak to the people, to understand who we are, what we stand for, and where we want to take the game. So for any opportunity, we definitely take it up, and I'm proud and privileged to be here.
Speaking of which, tell me a bit about yourself, you know, your childhood, how you grew up, where you went to school. I see you're an engineer, so, you know, maybe you can tell us a bit about that.
Well, born 1976 to somebody called Sam and Ruth, who are Christians. And at the age of 10, I decided to become a Muslim myself, despite my parents being Christians. And my dad passed away when I was about 3 years. I think that's about 1979 when Idi Amin, I think, was going away in that chaos. So I did my primary school in Kamuli, in a remote school called Kagulu Primary School. And I happened to go to Jinja College for my O-level. I did Namiryango for my A-level. I didn't want to miss a district.
So you did the whole round?
Kamuli, Jinja, Mukono. So by the time I came to the university, I was sure that I had gone through all the districts. But on a more serious note, I was a very simple student at school. I didn't get any disciplinary issues.
Yes.
And my mother keeps saying that. She wasn't called to school for anything. And I was a brilliant student in school. So it helped my parents to be able to find me good schools. They didn't have to run around. I got my schools by my grades. Then at university, I did engineering, electrical engineering.
Yes.
And yeah, that's why I'm called an engineer.
Yeah, it's interesting. Tell me a little bit, you know, you changed from Christianity to Islam. Was there a particular reason, a particular moment that made you change it, or you just...
I think incidentally, there wasn't any influence. Even the community I was growing in was very, very Christian. But I've always been a person who wants to find out. Even by that age, I was already trying to find out what is this, what is that. So I read a bit of Christianity, I read a bit of Islam, and I thought that the best thing for me was to become a Muslim. And I'm proudly a Muslim. I've been practicing Islam since that time. I like it.
That's actually amazing. At 10 years old, you figured this out. You know.
Yeah, I did, and for very good reasons. The good thing is that our mother was very, very comfortable. She said, "Is that what you want?" I said, "Well, if that's what you want." The other coincidence is that even all our siblings, the elder sisters and my younger brother, are all Muslims. It's only our parents who are not. But for me, it is because of the reading. I decided to read a lot at that time. I was reading the Bible, I was reading the Quran, I was starting to read the Quran. And I thought the best thing was to be a Muslim. So it was a decision, it was a personal decision.
So I hope you finish changing religion now. You're not going to change again?
No, not.
No? You're good now. Okay, so of course, everybody wants to know. So how did you, I mean, all of us love football. You know, I mean, I think it's the sport that everybody understands around the world. But why your interest in football? Because I can see you talk to me about being a good student, being a disciplinarian. Why your interest in football?
No, from my primary school, we had a very big courtyard at home. So most of the children from the village used to come to our home. And our mother used to buy simple balls for us.
Yes.
So we had the good balls, we had the courtyard, so every kid in the village used to come home. And from that time, I picked up the interest through primary school. But I was more of an athlete in school than even a footballer until my high school in Namiryango.
Yes.
That's when I started playing seriously active football. But in O-level in Jinja College, I was more of an athlete. I used to win the long races. Even in Namiryango, I used to win the long races.
We refer to them as fumblers because I went to St. Mary's, so I think we call them fumblers.
They are referred to as as weavers.
Oh, us, yeah, but I kind of try and ignore that part. But,
No, but on a more serious note is in Amiriango, it wasn't purely a very footballing school like others.
Yes.
So probably I started getting the opportunity to play. But I picked the interest, and when I went into my vacation of senior 6, I started playing very seriously with my village team. I was staying in Mutundwe. After that, when I finished university, I happened to be employed by Kinyara, and then there was a football team in Kinyara, which was in the Premier League. It wasn't yet at the Premier League. We pushed it into the Premier League and played in the Premier League. Yeah, but then my playing career in Kinyara got cut when I got a job in Kampala, which was much more paying, because I was playing football for fun. I wasn't playing for it on a very serious note. So I got a job with PricewaterhouseCoopers, which was multiplying my salary by about 5 times. So
I can imagine.
I had to choose between continuing to play football and then also my own career to grow up. So I came back. I continued playing for the village team here in Mutundu until I retired.
Oh, good. So, I mean, you played. Do you think you were a good player?
I think I was a good player. First of all, I was balancing academics, and I was doing a very serious professional course. Engineering needs a lot of time.
Yes.
But I managed to be able to be playing. And 2, I managed to play for the top club, the top league. So for me, that was good enough. But at the same time, I wasn't losing my other direction in terms of my career. Football takes a lot of time. If you want to excel at the highest level, you have to invest a lot of hours. So it's very difficult to find a footballer who is at the highest and at the same time also managing the career side of himself. So to balance the two, they are very rare. I think it's William Mkemba, you know, Dr. Katamba, Dr. Pico Poka, a few cases who really balanced the top and still played football at the highest level. But
you've done a good job, because of course you went on to become the president of FUFA. So tell me a bit about that. So you finish, you're at PricewaterhouseCoopers, you're working, you're making 5 times the salary that you're making in Kinyara, you've stopped playing football. Before we go to break, tell me, how did you actually take it from there to becoming the president of FUFA?
When I came from Kinyara, I started playing for the village team in Mutundwe. We pushed it to play very competitively. Everybody knows the kind of players we have produced. So in the process, I found that the team was not being managed very well. So I get involved to try and help here and there. In the process of managing the team, I find that the district, at that time, Lubaga was being called a district. I found that things were not being organized the way they should be. Then I got involved, and eventually I was running football at the district level. That's how you come up. Then eventually in 2004, when there was the disbandment of the Dennis Obua FUFA, Mr. Lawrence Mulindo came up. So I thought that there was a new dawn, and probably I should take up responsibility at a national level. I stood as a delegate from Lubaga, and I was voted unanimously. But at that time, I was still playing football, incidentally. You know?
Let me cut you short right there. We're going to break, then we'll come back and we'll carry on with that part of the trajectory. Welcome back to the show. We're still here with the president of FUFA, Engineer Moses Magogo. He was just telling us, you were just telling me about your trajectory, if that's the correct word, to the presidency of FUFA. So you were telling me about 2004, Dennis Obua, so I'll leave it from there.
Yeah, 2004, that is when the federation was disbanded by government. When Dennis Obua was president, so there was a bit of a vacuum at that time, and I took advantage of the vacuum. I'd already been elected as a delegate. Then Mr. Mulindo came, and I thought in my own vision that it was a good idea he had. We bring up something fresh. So we teamed up, we sold a manifesto, we were bored, and we were elected into the executive of FUFA.
You were his vice president?
No. I was elected as a member of the executive representing Kampala region.
Right.
And at that time, I was given to run the Premier League or all competitions in the federation as a secretary of the competitions committee. It was a voluntary thing and it needed a lot of time. But then I had a lot of time, so I did it. But I was still working with African Development Bank at that time. So I was juggling between playing football, being a secretary of the competitions committee, and at the same time working at the bank. Then 6 years later, I was made the vice president for the last 2 years of Mr. Mulindwa's second term.
That's 2010 now.
That's 2011.
11,
yes.
Okay.
For two years, I became the vice president. And after 2 years, he said he's not going to stand again. It was a surprise to all of us. We tried to convince him because we were not prepared. No one was prepared to take over. Nobody had been prepared to take over.
Yes.
But then he said, according to me, I think you're ready. You should be the person taking over. Personally, I wasn't sure, but the rest of my friends around said, we think you're ready, so take the responsibility, and that's how I get elected as a president.
Well, from the looks of things, you seem to be doing very well as a president, and FUFA seems to be in a much better place than it was maybe 6-7 years ago. And football in Uganda looks like it's on the upward rise. Of course, it takes time, baby steps, from the grassroots. But what's your strategy for running the federation as you do? I see a lot of good things. Of course, we now have a very good Minister of Education and Sports in the First Lady, who's given us a bigger budget than, or given sports a bigger budget than it used to have, or advocated for it. So, what's your strategy in making this federation successful? Because there are a lot of good things happening.
I think the first thing, the moment I accepted to become president, personally, I'm a very organized person. I work very long. I have attention to detail. So I thought that I was not just going to do this because I'm there. So I took a strategy, and I framed it on 4 pillars. The first was the institution. There was no way you're going to run football in this country without a strong institution that gave confidence to the stakeholders.
Yes.
So we had to do a lot of changes within the institution in terms of governance, in terms of the way we do things, in terms of the staffing. So we changed so many things inside the institution that probably people outside would not be able to see. Those are not things that people are going to see as results. But for example, I'll give you one. We had 8 staff who didn't have job descriptions. We are being paid a salary of about 8 million shillings a month. All of them, no NSSF, no pay as you earn. It was that loose, being paid in cash. But today we have 50 staff. We're paying pay as you earn of about 150 million a year for all this stuff. And they are not only in Kampala, they are in the 8 regions they are distributed. But we needed to make the institution strong and come out with the proper governance principles so that the stakeholders, the external stakeholders, can believe in us. When I talk about the external stakeholders, I talk about the government,
yes,
the media, the corporate world, then also our international affiliations like CAF and FIFA.
And the viewers, of course.
And of course the fans, who
yes,
are the main stakeholders, external stakeholders as far as we are concerned.
Yes.
Now, the second strategy was the resources. You cannot do anything without money. We had to find money, but we had also to work onto the little money we had and utilize it very well. So we put in place, before we used to have a treasurer who was, we had Mr. Chimuli Anthony, who works with the Office of the Auditor General.
Yes.
So in the evening when he's tired, he volunteers to come and do some work. But we decided to recruit full-time professionals in the area of finance, CPA, SCCA, certified accountants. And these helped us put in place a system that allows proper accountabilities and proper reporting. But at the same time, we recruited people in the marketing and communications department, professionals, right, again, who have helped to create the image, rebrand, and also package our presentations to the corporate world to accept us. This generated more revenues. We are getting about 300-400 million shillings a year in 2013 from sponsorships.
Yes.
We get almost 4 billion. That's almost times 10.
Can I ask for a loan?
No, we don't give loans.
Oh, okay.
We do development. We do a lot of development. So that was the area of marketing and finance. But then also the third thing we did is relationships. Yes. We decided to make sure we open up relationships. We went out to people. It was a very deliberate strategy. You could see us in the mosque, you could see us in the church, you could see us with celebrities, you could see us with politicians.
Yes.
Basically, we took our case to them and said, look, here is football, and this is what football can do. And eventually we were bought. And of course, the fourth thing we did was the sport itself. You do everything else, but remember, you must do the sport.
Yeah.
So in the process, we have worked on the league. You can see the league has turned around. The league was known for quarrels and squabbles all the time.
It looks good now. It looks really good.
Right now, we have pushed the clubs with club licensing and the club pro agenda. We have brought in the juniors league for the young players. So quality players are coming through the ranks. We have trained coaches from about 28 coaches then, level 4 at the level of Africa, to about 5,000 coaches today, distributed throughout the country from 28 to 5,000. And this was
to 5,000
yes,
coaches
over 5 years in different levels, you know. And this was a deliberate move that we continue doing that sometimes doesn't make the news, but at the end of the day, when eventually the team qualifies the Africa Cup of Nations, we celebrate. When it qualifies again with the game in hand, we celebrate again. But behind the scene, there are certain things we do that are not very popular, but at the end of the day, they're the ingredients that make the final product. Finally, also, our relationships with CAF and FIFA, we managed to break the ranks. Before, there wasn't any Ugandan way up there. It has a lot of advantages that I become the first Ugandan to be a member of the CAF executive.
Congratulations.
But it's a relationship. It's the way you communicate the people. When you are given an opportunity to speak, what do you speak?
Exactly.
So eventually, the whole of Africa looks at us and say we need somebody from Uganda. So our relationship with CAF are very, very healthy. Our relationship with FIFA, who finance our activities, are very, very healthy. They look at us as an example. The number of programs we have done here, and we have been asked to go and demonstrate them elsewhere. Probably what I didn't talk about in the area of marketing and communication.
Now, Mr. President, we're going to go to commercial break, but when we come back, I have a question that's a bit controversial. But coming on the show next is Mr. Andrew Owor, the Vice President of the Confederation of African Rugby. Welcome back from the break. Joining us on this segment is Mr. Andrew Owor. I don't know how to introduce this guy. This guy has done so many things. First of all, he's played rugby for Uganda. He's played rugby for Heathens. He was former president of the Uganda Rugby Union and is now newly elected as the vice president for Rugby Afrique, or Rugby Africa. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
And of course, we're still here with the president of FUFA, Engineer Moses Magogo. Before we went to the break, there's been a lot of controversy recently in the media. I don't know how deep it goes behind the scenes, where there have been allocations made to federations. And in this particular case, the media portrayed that FUFA was receiving 10 billion shillings out of an annual budget of 15 billion. And, you know, some federations were up in arms. You know, they felt like it was not equitable distribution of resources, of the resource envelope. Of course, it's the media, so we have to, that's why I'm going to ask you, what exactly is happening with this? We do understand that football is the biggest sport in the country, but we do have over 50 federations. So I think the debate is here, not whether football is the biggest, but about equitable distribution of the resource envelope.
First and foremost, as a federation, we decided to not to give this a lot of publicity because we are being understood differently. But people must understand that the sports sector was getting about 2 billion shillings for all of federations.
Yes.
Not until we came into some kind of advocacy as football. And there were so many things that happened behind the scenes until we get to a stage that the powers that are understood that actually there should be some investment in sport. And on one of those events, we met His Excellency the President, and we pitched and put case and said, look, these are the values that sport can bring to our country. And we use the word sport, not even football.
Yes.
We said this is the value of what sport can bring. And that time there were only 2 federations that had been invited. That is FUFA for football and netball. But we made case for sport, and my speech is recorded, and said, look, we can use sport. Then there was an allocation looking at what was required. And at that time, the allocation was only 10 billion that was available by the Minister of Finance. But when there was a letter written to the Ministry of Education to say, look, we shall provide 10 billion in the next financial year for football, and that's the only addition. It was again football and the National Council of Sports. We went back to the Minister of Finance and made the case and said, look, yes, we are football, thank you so much, but there are also other federations that must be considered in this. And that's how the extra 5 billion was actually added to make it 15.
Yes.
So from the beginning, that was the setup. And we agreed with the powers that this year, let it so be. And the challenge was that we cannot bring from 2 billion to 2 plus 15 in an industry. Probably it would cause a lot of confusion because this is money.
Yes.
So they told us that, guys, look, let us see how this is managed. And these are the rules of managing it.
Correct.
10 will go to football, 5 will go to the rest of the federations. And in this case, we made it without, sincerely speaking, other federations. It was only football plus netball. But when it came to really the advocacy and the meetings, it was only football in these meetings. But we made a case. Now, for me, this is not the biggest thing. I believe that sport should get much bigger than the 15 billion. It's not about the 10 billion going to FUFA.
Right.
It should be a lot more going to sport. Probably 10 billion should go to each of the federations. For me, that is not the challenge. We can still get a lot more resources from where we are coming from.
Yes.
It's not as if the 15 was closed. So if FUFA can get 10, probably boxing or athletics or other federations should get as much as their activities are. But you must also understand that football is a very expensive sport. Particularly, we are running 8 national teams. And by the way, government funds only the Uganda Cranes. But we run 8 national teams of 40 people traveling across Africa.
Right.
But there's also the value addition. You must understand the language of the boardroom. When government is investing, they also look at what reasons, why are they investing. So you must present yourself answering the kind of questions they would ask.
Yes.
What is the contribution back to the basket?
Right.
I just told you that football is paying 250 million in per yuan. We pay over 1 billion shilling in value-added tax from our various incomes. You know, so all these things government looks at. Much as they are spending 10, probably they are getting back 3 from the same industry.
Yeah, through the taxes.
Through the taxes,
yeah.
Let alone the other value additions that are coming along.
Yes.
So for me as sport, it is not good for us to start bickering inside ourselves. The message is clear that boxing, rugby, athletics, all of us, we have a value. We can handle the younger people.
I think, President, I think that one of the biggest challenges, and I think it's not just in sports, I think it's in Uganda in general, is how issues are communicated. The media releases information in bits and pieces, which at times can be misleading. So I think, you know, you've clarified exactly how the 10 billion comes to sit in FUFA's docket, and maybe it's a case that, you know, we then sit again as federation. And I keep saying we, you know, I'm not supposed to be sitting here in my capacity as a federation president, but I'm going to speak like that. You know, we have to sit down, reconcile, and see how we present a better case for our different federations come 2019, 2020. So let me move to Andrew here. You know, of course, we're limited by time, so I know football might consume the whole show. But of course, Andrew, tell me a bit about yourself. You know, tell me, you know, where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? And tell me a few things about yourself.
Well, I am St. Mary's College, Kisubi.
That's a very, very good school. It's a wonderful school. It's a very brilliant.
That's where I started my rugby.
Yes.
So a lot of my rugby was in the school. At the time, we didn't have much equipment. I played for the national schools barefoot. You can imagine playing rugby barefoot. At that
but I
time,
don't think that's fair, because us guys were there before you, and we were the first rugby team at St. Mary's. I don't know how you became barefoot.
Yes, we played barefoot at the time, schools.
Oh
did.
dear, that's awful. Okay.
Which school was that?
Say no,
St. Mary's.
you shouldn't say that in front of a younger person.
Yes, but you know, at the time, getting a rugby boot was
Yes, of course.
quite a difficult process. You needed the headgear, you needed mouth guards, and all these things were not readily available here. I was lucky; my sister was in the UK, and she could send me some of these things. But you know, after that, I played at the university. I was captain of the Makerere Impis
Yes.
at the time. I was chairman of Impis at the time. Then I shifted to Chadondo Rugby Club,
Yes.
where I was secretary of the club for about 4 years, and then became vice president and then president of Chadondo Rugby Club. After that, in 2013, I got elected as the president of the Uganda Rugby Union, and I've been there for the last 6 years. And now I am elected as the vice president of Rugby Africa, which includes South Africa and all the other countries around. So it's been a shift for me. It's been from running a school team to running African affairs and having now to make decisions across the continent with regard to the sport. So it's been a huge journey for me, and on both ends. So I did electrical engineering at Makerere.
Yes.
And because of rugby, I broke my wrist, and so
Yes.
I couldn't do any actual engineering work. I ended up in the computer field, so I did a second degree in computer science.
Yes.
And so that's my professional life.
Right.
Yeah, and I now run a company, an IT company on my own. So it's been a journey on both the professional and on the rugby side, and to see how sport actually affects your professional life and how you can grow as a leader. And to me, that's why I'm still in the business, is because of the effect that sports can have. It doesn't have to be money, but it's just it brings values into your life that you won't learn in class and you won't do it anywhere else. And so that's been my story, really.
So really, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, the way sport has been managed in Uganda is changing. I can see both of you, you and the president of FUFA, now vice president of Rugby Afrique, and of course, engineer, you sit on the ExCom of the
Confederation of African Football.
Confederation of African Football. So we're going beyond Uganda in terms of sports administration. So there is a case for, that we are able to balance being a sports administrator, being an athlete,
Yeah.
and actually having an education. We're going to go to break, and when we come back, we're going to speak to Andrew and continue speaking with the president of FUFA, Moses, about their different sports, but in particular, I want Andrew to tell me how rugby has improved over the last 10 years in Uganda. Welcome back to the show. We're still here with the Vice President of Rugby Afrique, Mr. Andrew Owor, and the President of FUFA, Engineer Moses Magogo. Actually, you're both engineers, so I don't know if you want me to put an engineer in front of you.
No, computer.
Anyways, Andrew was saying, rugby's been around for a while, but what is your view? Do you think it's improved over the last 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, in 2011, there were only 6 teams playing in the Premier League,
right.
And it was it. It was 6 teams.
Yes.
Since then, we are now 28 teams
right.
playing, and 28 with teams playing in the north, in the east. Actually, the east is growing very fast, and now the west. 2 years ago, we had 2 teams. Now we have 4 teams.
Right.
And 2 other teams wanting to join in. So there's been a huge shift in the kind of play, and a lot of it being, yes, in the central region, but if you look at the teams that have been waiting out on the side, in Kitgum, in Lira, and now in Nebi as well, there's rugby there. I think it's been a huge...
Do you think it has a lot to do with your grassroots program? I know you have something with Tag Rugby.
Yeah.
you know, where you have the little kids, under 10.
Yes, so it's called the Get Into Rugby program.
Yes.
So Get Into Rugby program is GIR, which
Yes.
stands in you try,
Yes.
you play, and
Yes.
then you stay. So
Yes.
the concept is people like yourself, maybe who played a bit of rugby, we try and keep you in the sport.
Right.
You know, and people like the engineer here might try a bit of it. So we have different forms.
That I'd like to see.
Yes, so, so a bit of
like to see.
touch rugby, which is not non-contact.
Yes.
And then you see a lot of people think that rugby is all about contact.
Right.
It's no. We have 7 different versions of the sport.
Right.
And so from touch to tag to sevens to tens to and all these are played internationally.
And tell me, you know, there's the women's rugby team. I've heard, again, maybe it's a rumor, are more successful than the men, because they've actually qualified for the
2009 World Cup.
They qualified for the World Cup.
Yes, and they did play in Dubai. It was the World Cup.
This is 15s.
That was sevens.
7.
It was sevens.
Okay, so the boys caught up a few years later.
Yes, the boys caught up a few years later. I think it was a pity that at that time we did not use that opportunity to further the sport. Many people didn't know that the first national team for Uganda to ever go to a World Cup was the women's sevens rugby
So we
team.
can congratulate them.
Yes,
you know,
I
for
think
being
so.
the first.
No, but
rugby
Cedric,
team.
for me, where I need to give credit to Andrew and the entire rugby is
Yes.
how they have managed to use, to put the sport of rugby in the elite schools. For us as football, it is not exactly the case. And you know, it is very important that some of us who went to these schools, you'll understand that some of these people who come from these schools are people who are going to be key decision makers here and there. So for the sport, it has been very good. You guys, we need to get lessons from you how that has been done. I've not seen Namiryango, Chisubi, Budo really doing the way they do rugby, doing it in football. So for me, I think that's a very good credit that we give you guys. I don't know how you've done that.
Yeah, well, I think the strategy has always been to try and get into schools. Now it's shifting a little from just schools to teacher colleges. The reason is that when you get the teachers understanding a sport properly, because we are the only team contact sport, and so because of the contact nature, you need the teachers or the people coaching or the people refereeing to understand the risks involved in the sport. So if you get the teachers understanding this, then as they get deployed anywhere in the country, they are shifting with this knowledge, and therefore you naturally get the sport being safer for the kids and for the parents being more comfortable with the sport in the school. And that I mean, to me, is going to be the next frontier for rugby in Uganda.
I think one of the things that, being an administrator in sport as well, is that, sometimes, we are barking up the wrong tree. People want the events, the big events, they want the bells, the lights, the whistles, whatever it may be. But in order to produce great athletes, the biggest ambassadors of sport, as far as I'm concerned, are the coaches.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones who spread the game nationwide. They're the ones who teach good technique. Good technique is what wins matches. And I think that, you said, engineer, that you've gone from 50 coaches, 15? 28 coaches to
about 5,000.
To about 5,000. So we are expecting the Cranes to play in 2022 at the World Cup.
No. It doesn't come instantly.
But
what we have done is that after getting people who understand the game,
yes,
you can see our younger players almost qualify for the World Cup, the under-17 recently.
Yes.
But you look at the quality of these younger players and the style and the way they enjoy the game, they're more interesting to watch than even sometimes the seniors, because they understand things at a proper age.
Yes.
So we think we will do a fight for 2022, but our target is that by 2026, these under-17 boys should be able to take us to the World Cup in America, Mexico, and Canada.
Let's not even go too far. Let's congratulate you and your executive for having spearheaded our qualification to AFCON in Egypt this year.
Right.
And of course, we wish them the best.
Thank you.
We've all been involved in sport, so we don't prophesize too much about the outcome. They've qualified, and then we'll take it step
One
by
step at
step.
a time, yeah.
Step by step, and we'll see what happens. But we wish them the best. Now, before we cut to commercial again, I want to ask both of you, what is your view of the sports industry in Uganda?
Oh, it's not an industry yet. I think we totally miss out on the business of sport. And so there is sport, there is the activity, the physical activity, but then there is the business of sport. Business of sport can employ thousands and millions of people in a country. And just take for example, if you look at what FUFA has done with just the merchandising and jerseys.
Yes.
Do you know the number of people on the streets selling these things? That is an occupation for those youngsters. But if there was no business behind the sport, those people wouldn't be on the street selling those things. So, that's just a trivial example. But there's so many things that you can build on top of sport that it goes into every industry.
Moses, what do you think?
No, we've been amateur for a very long time,
Yes.
since the various disciplines were brought to this country, hundreds of years, if I can say. So the biggest challenge you're going to have is the mindset. There are
Right.
not very many people who conceptualize sport. And I've always been saying that people look at the language commonly spoken in this part of the country, that's Luganda, emizanyo, which is the same thing like comedy, like drama, like everything else.
Yes.
So people have not taken us to the level that this is an economic activity, this is something that can be used much better for our country. But just to support what Andrew is saying is that it's not yet an industry, but there are certain things that are deliberately supposed to be done to convert it into an industry.
Now let's take that back when we come back from commercial. Welcome back to the Cedric Live Show. I'm still here with Andrew Owor, Vice President of Rugby Afrique, and Engineer Moses Magogo, the President of FUFA. Sport is a $650 billion a year industry. And before we went to the break, I was speaking to both these presidents about the sports industry in Uganda. Moses, you're telling me something about the sports industry in Uganda.
No, I think my point was that it's not yet an industry, just like Andrew put it, but the values will need another show for itself, what sport can bring to this country. But what do we need to do to convert it into the industry? There are certain industries that exist already. We don't want to go very far. We saw when ICT came in, we saw how the oil industry came in. These are industries. They provide employment, they are a tax base, so they bring up a lot of value. So is a sport. It is also an industry. And I can tell you that in 2008, during the international credit crunch, if you remember, every business was collapsing apart from sport.
It's recession-proof.
Yeah, that's the time when Cristiano Ronaldo was being bought for $80 million to Real Madrid.
Yes.
So sport is such a robust industry that can take up young people. And the challenge of this country is that very many young people who are not employed. And this abundant energy can only be consumed usefully by sport. And sport is another form of hope. I can give you, why are people into Pentecostal churches? Because there is hope. They sell hope. Yes. By divine intervention, you'll get a wife, you'll go to Europe or whatever they tell you, But
a wife?
I mean, depending on what your aspirations are, they sell hope. The same thing with the betting houses. They sell hope.
Yes.
The beauty about probably the betting houses that the hope is instant.
Yes.
Maybe tomorrow you'll become a millionaire or something.
Yes.
And you see young people going into Pentecostal churches, going into betting, but they can as well go into sport. Only that sport right now, we are not selling hope. And if you're not selling hope that if I play football, if I play rugby, probably I can become this kind of person. Now that's what we need to do to create hope, and the young people will be involved, and this abundant energy would be consumed. But what do we need to do briefly? As an industry, there must be proper legislation. You'll see that when the oil industry came, when the ICT came, there was effort to make legislation to manage the industry. And industry is managed by proper legislation. Yeah. The second thing is infrastructure. An industry requires a certain form of infrastructure. Andrew, you're saying you're in ICT. You see they had to do the backbone. There are so many things that the government would invest in to create an infrastructure for that industry.
For purpose of the viewers, when you say infrastructure, what do you mean?
No, I mean stadiums. I'm talking about equipment.
Yeah.
I'm talking about sports medicine equipment. But also, don't forget the curriculum. Now there are people doing ICTs in universities. There are people doing oil courses in universities. Yeah. Who is doing sport? What are we exactly doing sport? You know, there are so many things. Where is the sports law? For example, who is doing it in this country? So there's certain deliberate effort. Yeah. There's a certain deliberate effort that must be done to convert this amateur, yet a very good potential for consuming all our youth. Do you know that 70% of this country's population is below 30 years?
Yeah, 30 million people. Yeah, they're below, and half of those are.
How are you going to consume all these people? How are you going to make them busy? Apart from sport. And you know, sport, you don't need a degree. You don't need anything. So if I'm talented, tomorrow I'm a rugby player, I'm going to turn around the vicious circle of a certain family. Yeah. You know, the people depending around us.
And then, of course, you don't have to go to church to look for a wife.
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
Sandra, what do you think? Yeah. Let me ask you something. So, in your opinion, and this question goes to both of you, what do you think? Of course, there needs to be a trigger. There needs to be something that triggers the sports industry.
Yes.
So, what do you think is that trigger?
I think it needs to start from government being involved, like he says.
Okay.
So taxation. You won't imagine that right now every federation pays to bring in taxes to bring in national team gear.
Yes.
And I think these are simple exceptions. Say that you want to boost the ICT industry, you took away VAT and said, look, bring in as many computers as you can.
Right.
Do the same thing for sport. And
Yes.
say you want to grow that industry, so open up the doors and let as much sport be played in the country.
Okay.
Then go to the national side and say, look, if you've gone through all these ranks, you know, he was running football at a club, and then you've gone to all these ranks as a player. How does government step in at that point?
Yes.
If you are the best football player in the country, are you on a payroll? You go to New Zealand, all the players from New Zealand
Have a contract
with the government,
Yes.
not with the federation. It's with the government. And so you realize that these players, when they leave the country, they are committed. They say, no, my government is behind me.
Yes.
You'll never hear of a New Zealand players going to play in the UK or play. They are committed to their country.
Right.
And so they go back, and it's a negotiation. The federation tops up whatever it is, but your initial contract is with your country, which means your contract is with the people of that country. And there's a difference when you feel the obligation to deliver for the people of that country. So if you don't trigger that and begin to make people feel like, look, I can go through all this process, but I know when I reach there, I will be one of the 40 on the government payroll. Right. And therefore, I am now recognized. And therefore, I have got some sort of... it doesn't cost much more money.
Okay, now, you talk about money. This year, government allocated, I don't know if it's been received, but 15 billion shillings. Am I right, President Magogo?
Yeah, 15 plus 2. There was 2 already,
yeah.
Then they added on the
17.
You know, I actually thought about that 15 plus 2, and then I said, Cedric, you really should know that. But anyway, so 17 billion shillings.
Yeah.
If you had a wish, based on your different experiences, in the budget 2019-2020, what do you think should be allocated to sport? Ballpark figure. Let's not get into details.
I think from my point of view, first of all, we need to appreciate where we are coming from. Mm-hmm. We don't want to sound like nothing is being done. We must appreciate.
Of course.
I think our qualification, I will use our qualification to AFCON,
yes,
kind of opened up an environment for us to engage that the powers are. And in that engagement, there's been a subvention of 15 billion shillings added to the industry.
Right.
If you look at what National Council of Sports really we are trying to do, we're asking for about 60, 70 billion shillings to look after the federations. And I would still think probably...
Is that all the federations?
For all the federations.
Not just football?
No, all the federations.
Yes.
And it is justifiable. I must mention.
Yes.
It's only that the people who allocate resources in this country must look at the prioritization. There are very many other priorities that the country has, you know. So we must appreciate that we are coming from somewhere. But have we utilized this money positively to try and say that when we inject this, what exactly is coming out, which I think we have done very rightly. There has been a very big turnover. Let us not look at the 15 this year. Government has been coming in, throwing in here and there.
Right.
And you can see there's been performance in basketball, in rugby, in wherever little money has been thrown.
Don't forget the ladies, netball. We don't want any problems.
Netball, you know, I'm saying wherever government has put some investment, there has been some results that have shown.
And look, you know, in rugby, we used to receive 6 million shillings a year. Just be honest. The most we had received over the last 40 years was about 16 million.
Right.
The year they decided to come on board and they gave us 120 million, we went to a World Cup.
Yeah, I remember you guys went to San Francisco.
So you can see that, and if you look at that's a drop in the ocean compared to this 60 billion shilling budget that we're talking about. Some of these boys and players and women, what they need is 500,000 a month.
Right.
1 million shillings a month.
Right.
And for you to pay 40 people 1 million shillings a month to be committed to your country, you look at the bigger scheme of things and the benefit of that for the country. I mean, it's a worthwhile investment. That's what I'm saying. Get it from the top. Trigger it from there. Open doors. Let people do sports business. A lot of tourism, you want the tourists to come here and go to Buwindi. They need an excuse to fly to the country. It's not just to come and see a gorilla.
You know, I was reading...
come and watch the football and then go to see the gorilla.
Because, you know, sports tourism is, I think, from a global perspective, is 10% of the total tourism industry.
Yeah.
And it works out at something like 800 billion a year or something like that. Yeah. Which is ridiculous. You know, it's a lot of money. You know, sporting events, the World Cup, Super Bowl, all these are just massive events.
Huge.
But I think that ultimately, the 50 plus federations need to function as business units, like what you've done with FUFA and what you've tried to do with rugby. And now, of course, you've gone to the African level, even with the president of FUFA, Moses. He's up that African level. And I think that if the federations are to get the basic requirements to fund their activities, sports will become an industry.
Yeah.
But there are two questions before we go. Do you feel that corporate Uganda embraces sport?
Well, they try. They try. I'll be honest that they could do more.
Yes.
But if you look at countries like Botswana, when a corporate puts in money, there is a tax rebate for that, equivalent. Right. So they don't look at it as a spend. They look at it as an investment. So they're getting back from government. And these are the doors I'm talking about to open.
Yes.
I think we need to benchmark across Africa, across other continents. Yes. You look at visas for people to come in.
Yes.
I try to get South Africans here, and the headache is for them to get a visa into Uganda.
Yes.
There's some online system that doesn't work and blah, blah, blah. Yes. You know, when I pick up my passport and I fly to Hong Kong, I walk in. Why? Because Hong Kong, one of their biggest industries is sport and allowing the tourists to come in easy. So it is things like this. And I think there is a need to actually sit down with these federation heads. They are not at the same level. No, let's not mince words. Some federations are just starting. Some don't know how to go through the works. But then have a structure in the place and say, look, this is your entry level. As you grow in the system, we will now even put an attaché from government within your federation to help you develop this, help you do that, help you do that. Simple things like audited accounts.
Yes.
I think you'll find that the big federations that are successful have the audited accounts. Will you find that with the smaller ones? No, they can't afford it. They don't know the importance of it and things like that. So it's a process. It's something that we did in rugby that changed the perception of the clubs, was we began to have what they call club audits. So you go into a club as a federation and you sit with them and say, look, where are your accounts? Show me your accounts, even if it's on a piece of paper, even if it's on an Excel sheet. Let's see that you are actually keeping track of your money.
Yes.
Yeah? It's not, we're not asking you to account to us. We're asking you to show us that you're able to account to your own members. you know. And that's the perspective that people need to have.
Now, unfortunately, we have to close the show. But I'm going to ask you, Vice President of Rugby Afrique, Andrew Owor, and the President of FUFA, just some closing remarks. Give you a few seconds each, some closing remarks. But I would like to thank you very much for coming on the Cedric Live Show, which is going to air on UBC. So I guess I'll start with you, Engineer.
For me, very briefly, you cannot make the corporate world understand how to use sport without television. The first thing is that there must be Ugandan sport on television for the corporate world to benefit.
Yeah.
I mean, they must invest money as sponsors, but they must also get the benefit as brands. But I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for the invitation to the show and our viewers who have been with us, the entire crew. Andrew, congratulations once again to get to the continental level. I think we are doing a good job as Ugandans to this level. There is already William, who is on the international level.
Yes.
I think this is very good for us as a country. And if we are to come together and create a solution, I think we have enough brains. I don't think sport in this country has ever had the kind of brains that are managing sport like it is right now.
Yes.
So for me, it's an opportunity we need to seize.
Okay. Andrew?
I think for me, it was an eye-opener. Getting into the position where I was, going into an election, and you have Africa speaking to the French-speaking, English-speaking, and a lot of controversy there. But for them to be able to say, look, of all these people, you are going to be the one to lead us in this area, it triggers a few questions to say, look, we've done well in Uganda. Now we need to grow this across the continent. So we're already leading as a country. We just need to keep that momentum going. And I think you're going to see good results in football. You're going to see good results in rugby and all the other ends. For example, we have an under-20 competition Uganda is hosting. And a lot of that requires, like he says, the TV and the media to come on board. Next week,
I think you're in the right place.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
And I'm speaking with the President of FUFA about this.
Yes.
And I'll speak to the new president of rugby about this.
Yes.
And even on continental level.
Yeah,
and I hope that we can bring back Ugandan sport to television. Thank you very much for watching the Cedric Live Show. With us today was the President of FUFA, Engineer Moses Magogo, and the Vice President of Rugby Afrique and former President of Uganda Rugby, Mr. Andrew Owor. Thank you very much, viewers, and we look forward to having you next week.